Fox News alert. It is vote day. 18 months of rough and tumble, unpredictable politics, and electing a new president. Millions of Americans now headed to the polls to choose the 45th president of the United States. Candidates Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton cast their votes earlier today, just hours after making their final pitches to the American people. This is an excited Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here today, Sandra Smith. Co-host of After the Bell on Fox Business, Melissa Francis.
I voted. You
That's your sticker. Democratic strategist Julie Roginski. Today's hashtag, One Lucky Guy. And we are so glad to have him with us all the time, but especially today. Fox News chief political anchor and anchor of special report, Bret Baier. You are co-anchoring our election coverage tonight. And I am just amazed that you're awake and you're ready to go because you were already up late last night.
Fired up and ready to go.
Yeah, look at you.
We're ready to go. Can you believe that 595 days ago, Senator Ted Cruz was the first one in the race?
Yeah.
Wow.
595 days, and here we are.
And we all still look so young. That's crazy. After all that, thank you for being here.
It's great to be here.
You ready to rock and roll?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We are just hours away from knowing the results from the only polls that matter, the ones with the voting booths. We are watching the presidential candidates' final pushes for votes, continuing from a very long, late night. Did they even sleep?
We face the test of our time. So remember, it's not just my name or Donald Trump's name on the ballot. It's the kind of country we want. It's every issue anyone cares about.
There is one core question for you to consider. Do you want America to be ruled by the corrupt political class? Or do you want America to be ruled by you, the people? That's what it is, by the people.
And remember, when my opponent says, every time I talk about these issues, that I'm playing the woman's card, well, you know what I say, deal me in.
Today is our Independence Day. Today, the American working class is going to strike back.
Senior national correspondent John Roberts, who is with the Trump campaign, joins us live now from here in New York. John, always good to see you. What's happening?
Harris, good afternoon to you. I just said hi to Donald Trump Jr. and his wife Vanessa. They had 4 of their 5 children in tow. They came out of PS 59 behind me after voting for Don Trump Jr.'s father, just kind of nonchalantly walking down the street together. It was really an interesting scene. Contrast that with this. When Donald Trump arrived about 11 o'clock this morning in full U.S. Secret Service motorcade to vote, and we have confirmed it this morning on Fox and Friends, for himself in today's presidential election. Went inside to PS 59. I heard that maybe he might have bought a cookie on his way in because apparently they were selling some baked goods, and then cast his vote. Wife Melania was with him, daughter Ivanka, and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. Donald Trump briefly talked to the pool as well about today. Listen.
Did you vote?
What a fiasco, but we did.
Thank you.
Mr. Trump, what are you hearing about early returns so far from your team?
Very good.
Very good?
Everything's very good.
Any states in particular?
Just very good, generally speaking.
Well, there aren't any early returns from anywhere but the very upper part of New Hampshire, Dixville, Notch, Hart's location, that area. In the overall, Donald Trump came out ahead, but we don't know what the overall vote is going to be in New Hampshire. Certainly the outcome here in New York City is not in question. It'll go Democratic, even though Donald Trump was talking early in the campaign about trying to put New York State in play. But there are plenty of other places across the country that are in play. Donald Trump visited 10 states, 14 events over the 72 hours leading up to this election, finishing off last night at about 1 o'clock in the morning in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a state where his campaign says the numbers are tightening, though that would seem to go against what we've been seeing in the public polling. There's no question, though, Harris, that he has got a very narrow path to 270. I mean, a quick calculation, if he wins everything that Mitt Romney won in 2012, and he adds in there the state of Nevada, Iowa, Ohio, Florida, New Hampshire, and the 2nd Congressional District in Maine, that will take him to 270 votes. He also hopes to play in Michigan, maybe Minnesota and Virginia, but neither one of those would be deemed highly likely for him at this point. Harris?
All right, John Roberts, I wonder what kind of cookie it was, in fact. We'll have to find out. Kidding.
We'll try to confirm.
Okay. Thank you. Now let's go to the Democratic nominee. As I mentioned, Hillary Clinton also voted earlier today, just hours after she made her final pitch to voters. For more on Team Clinton, let's bring in senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel live in Hillary's hometown of Chappaqua, New York. Hi, Mike.
Harris, good afternoon. The campaign visits to battleground states are now over, and Hillary Clinton is now working with her team on two speeches. One if she wins, the other if she loses, based on the outcome. Clinton and her husband, former President Bill Clinton, created quite a stir at the local elementary school when they went to vote first thing this morning. She was swarmed by neighbors and supporters wishing her well. A senior Clinton aide tells me there's a sense of relief that after this long, bruising campaign, they are at the light at the end of the tunnel. And the Clinton team feels like with her out campaigning until arriving home around 4 this morning, she gave it everything she had. After voting, Clinton reflected briefly on this historic moment.
It is the most humbling feeling, Dan, because, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election.
After voting, Clinton also called into radio stations in some strategic places, for example, Florida, North Carolina, and Michigan. She called a Charlotte radio station and spoke briefly about North Carolina's controversial bathroom law.
I feel like in your state right now, people are saying, hey, we want to get back to being the model. We don't want to be known for discrimination and some of these, unfair and untrue feelings about us. We want to lead the country again in all kinds of ways. And I think that's what North Carolina should be doing. So, yeah, I love being there, and I look forward to coming back in the future.
In a few hours, Clinton is expected to leave her Chappaqua home to head for a New York City hotel. Bottom line, she wants to watch returns there, finish up those speeches. And sorry about the traffic, Harris.
Oh, no, I was actually focused on the gazebo behind you. It looks so idyllic. It's good to see you.
Beautiful town.
It is. Thank you very much. Punishing travel schedule. Brett, does any of it really make a difference on this last day with voters?
Well, it does, especially in the two states that we saw them travel to yesterday, Michigan and Pennsylvania. There's very limited early voting. There's absentee voting, but there's not like an early voting statute where they can vote in big numbers. So they have to really gin up the vote to get out to the polls on election day. So that's why Michigan and Pennsylvania are a big stop. And also it's very tight in those states. I mean, in less than 7 hours, you'll have 9 states closing. In those, there are a lot of early votes. For example, Florida, both teams, Republican and Democrat, are looking at Florida and that early vote and how it splits. You have some 43 million people who have voted early, the most we have ever seen.
Yeah.
And maybe 130 million will vote in this election.
So that's so fascinating because when you talk about how late the night may go, at least for those first 8 or 9 states, we could know relatively early what the projections are.
Well, if it's very tight, we're not going to be able to make a call until the raw vote total starts
on the
flowing
total.
In on the total.
Right.
But when you get the early vote plus the exit polls, our decision desk is going to be able to make a kind of a modeled prediction of where the state may be headed.
What's Brett Baer watching? What is going to be the big state for you to watch tonight?
Well, I'm going to watch Florida. I'm going to watch North Carolina, and then I'm going to watch Michigan. And I think that those 3 states will tell a big story about where things are going. New Hampshire also closes at 7 o'clock, and that is also very tight. And if we see this vote materializing that is not being tracked by the polls, that could tell us something that happens through the night.
Can I just say, it is an exciting day. I went and voted this morning with my family. I took my son. It was exhilarating. This has been a bruising battle, and I think everybody out there knows that. But it was so refreshing to go and cast that ballot. It reminded us why this country is great. And after all this, when I looked around, why we can come together after it. Please go vote. I mean, it really, it refreshed my spirit.
Well, it is
and
so
send
true
those
about
pictures.
that. Yeah, selfies, right?
I did. I sent mine.
Fox News 2016, hashtag that, and we might be able to see you or Megan put it on the air tonight. But you bring up such a beautiful point. I mean, it is actually going to be a brain stretch, Julie, to imagine how we all come together. So if we can practice democracy together and not ask each other, what did you do or why did you do it, and just kind of get through the day, maybe that's a good start.
You know, can I just say that there are people all over the world that literally die for the privilege that all of us have to go vote.
That's right.
And
That's right.
People who have died in this country for that privilege.
Exactly right. And John Lewis, actually, a congressman, one of the great civil rights leaders of our time, sent out a tweet basically saying that there are people who died for the privilege to vote. So I don't care who you're voting for, as Melissa said. It's so important to exercise that franchise. You have women who 100 years ago were not able to vote, African Americans who couldn't vote. All sorts of people who now have the franchise. Just vote. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Just come out and do it, because as somebody who comes from a country where we were not able to do that freely,
it was not an option.
Trust me.
Yeah.
This is a privilege that people all over the world would die for.
Absolutely. So it's a wonderful coming together here, but I would imagine that is not how the candidates feel at all.
Well, and we wonder if we're going to have that coming together moment tonight. Once we know who wins this election, right now we know that the candidates are preparing speeches for either way, a win or a loss. I mean, what do you expect based on either one of them? I mean, really, you can't say either one would be a surprise at this point because the polling has been so tight.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that no matter what happens, the other candidate is going to be magnanimous, unless, you know, there are some major problems. Just historically, voter fraud has not been a big problem nationwide. We have a team that is going to follow up on all the reports tonight, if there are any, to run them down. James Rosen and a team of producers are going to fact check things and try to get to the facts. But it historically has not been a big issue. So I think the hope is that whatever happens, the speeches are going to be magnanimous about coming together and the peaceful transition of power. You know, yesterday we showed the images of the inauguration stands being created outside the White House. Built. I mean, that gives you a sense that this thing is real. Somebody's going to be president January 20th.
And then we have to get beyond today.
That's right.
Oh, glad to have you.
Chilling.
Thank you for being here. All right, we'll move on. Today, Fox News Channel is the only place to be. From dawn until the wee hours of tomorrow morning, potentially, we will have election coverage from across America and the very best analysis for you as well. At 6 p.m. Eastern, Brett and Megan will be at the helm in our brand new studio. It is something to see for certain. It's so fancy. And we want you to be a part of the coverage. We just talked about it moments ago. If you have voted or are getting ready to vote, post your picture on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram with the hashtag Fox News 2016. You could see it on air tonight. And with this presidential election soon to enter the history books, the scandals and the surprises rocking both campaigns in the final months of the race, the one that may have had the most impact in the last 30 days, we'll take a look. And as the race comes down to the wire, people there in Arlington, Virginia are voting the candidate who has the best path to the magic number. Not just for baseball anymore. The 270 electoral college votes needed to win the White House. The states that could decide it all. Stay with us.
News alert, we are just hours away now from the first polls closing as millions of Americans casting their ballots for their new president. And as we come down to the wire, who has the best path to the 270 electoral votes needed to win? With the race tightening in its final days, the states to watch tonight, and can Donald Trump flip a blue state? All right, let's talk first about the math here. Everybody's coming up with a way, as far as the Trump campaign is concerned, a path. They say they've got several. What does it look like right now?
Well, they do have several paths, but they do have to run the table. And so if Hillary Clinton and the Democrats can win Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, or Ohio, the path gets really, really tricky. And you have to win a lot of states, and you have to win, you know, one of those ones that has been elusive, a blue state like Michigan. So there is definitely a path, and some of these states are very close. And if, as I said, the polls are wrong by 2 points, you could see a lot of states go the other way.
You know, it's interesting because I've heard you say Michigan a couple of times today, and I know Donald Trump doesn't get a lot of credit for, having looked at really what a path could be, but he has talked about Michigan a lot.
He worked hard there.
Yeah, he really did, and he's talked about how cars are made more and more outside this country, so on and so forth. So he may not have done the traditional modeling, and he's gotten criticism for not having that in play, but it is interesting that he knows that state so well, so much that Michael Moore even answered back. I don't know if you caught that video where he would understand if people in Michigan voted for Trump.
Well, look, it went for Bernie Sanders, and in a surprise win in the primary, Hillary Clinton was up double digits, and Bernie Sanders ends up pulling out the win there. It lines up with Donald Trump and his message on the economy, and I'd say that or Pennsylvania is the likeliest blue state to go.
And Julie, just in these final days, the Fox News desk calling a lean Republican on Arizona, changing the final days. Iowa, leaning Republican. In the final days, there seem to be some toss-ups going Republican.
Well, Arizona, I think, was always going to be a stretch for Democrats this cycle. Let's wait for 2020 for when Arizona, I think, really becomes a true purple state the way Virginia has over the last few cycles. Georgia will follow probably 2024 because of shifting demographics. Iowa is, to me, the state that he's most likely to flip from what Obama did 4 years ago to Republican. Iowa seems to be trending very much in his direction, which is helpful to him. I'm skeptical, Brett, about Pennsylvania tremendously.
No, I agree. It's been elusive for every Republican.
Since '88. I'm skeptical about Michigan for the same reasons, same similar demographics. I think cities like Flint, cities like Detroit will carry her over the top. But he does have opportunities in places like Iowa, which much more aligned demographically with where his support is, and he's coalesced the Republican Party there early, which is not something he's been able to do in other states around the country.
I think it's interesting. I mean, now's when we find out if those rigged phony polls are really phony and so off. I mean, he said that so many times during the campaign. We've talked about, the people that like Trump and want to vote for him but aren't willing to say it out loud. We see today if that's really true. I mean, the other effect is that Hillary Clinton's supporters all have very much felt like they had it in the bag along the way, and you wonder about turnout in that event. I mean, people worry about that. So there's just a lot of different factors at work that could upset what some people are seeing, and so I would encourage everyone to watch.
You're right. I already put Iowa in his column. I was saying, what does he need to go to get to the 270? He's going to have to win one of the big states.
He does. And it's going to have to be Florida. That's the biggest prize. And Florida, we can talk about this further, but Florida, from what I understand, the Latino vote has been so strong in early voting, it's going to be tough for him to do.
Well, it's a busy day. There's some things going on we want to get to. Things expected to be tense tonight as the results come in. Fox News has been offered an exclusive look inside the Trump campaign's war room, where their experts will crunch the numbers that we're talking about right here and monitor the network's TV coverage. Fox News correspondent Shannon Bream is live in New York City with Trump spokesman Jason Miller. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, Sandra. Yeah, this is an exclusive look inside. This is where people are monitoring what goes on. They've got a fast response team from media. We got a sneak peek inside the room where they're crunching the numbers and keeping an eye on the legal issues as well. Jason Miller is here with us. How are you feeling going into this final day?
We're feeling good. So here you're inside the war room, the campaign's war room, where we're tracking the media 24/7. We have our TVs. We have people tracking social media and the computers. And then one level below us is where we have our data center. We're tracking the precinct by precinct returns all around the country. We're feeling good. We're seeing good things in North Carolina and in Michigan and in Florida this morning, tracking everything. It's early. Everyone, they're long lines, short lines, rain, no rain. We're watching everything.
And listen, people are obviously working very hard. They're very quiet for us while we're in here right now, but they are working really hard to keep an eye on things. You've been at this for well over a year at this point. You come down to this final decision today. I understand Mr. Trump was here earlier and kind of rallying the troops. How is everybody feeling going into that final stretch?
I think inspired, energetic. I think we're feeling good about tonight. When Mr. Trump came through a little bit ago, everyone greeted him with a standing applause right after he had voted. I feel like we're really at the verge of something historic here.
Okay. Now, we did get a look at the numbers crunchers, the legal teams, but I got to show people, we should show them something else here. This is what's powering the team. Check out these. We're trying to think of another name for them besides donuts, because these things are like a meal. They've got things inside. There are multiple layers to them. How important is the sugar and the carb?
It's important, and I really like that one, and then that one and that one. we're really good also.
Oh, and by the way, if you'll look behind us, you could see Sean Spicer is here from the RNC. Wave, Sean, as they coordinate. And we don't know how many donuts he's had. I'm not going to attribute any donuts to him, but he is here as the team works together with the party. And by the way, we're going to go over to Hillary Clinton's headquarters as well and give you an inside look there. In the meantime, wishing everyone the best as you work hard and the teams on both sides have a big fight. And we find out tonight what the American people think. Thanks, Jason.
We're feeling good. Thank you.
All right, back to you guys.
All right, Shannon Bream, a live look inside Donald Trump's war room on Election Day with some tasty treats. Much needed, I'm sure. Shannon, thank you. Well, it was a race filled with controversies and October surprises, that's for sure. So as Americans head to the polls today, will any of those scandals stick to the candidates? And which ones had the biggest impact? Plus, a lot more is at stake in this election than just the presidency, control of Congress. Also hanging in the balance, we'll take a look at the down ballot races that could shake up Washington.
Big question now. As millions of Americans are making their way to the polls, which 2016 controversy had the biggest impact with voters? What did you find that resonated? On the final day of her campaign, Hillary Clinton still dealing with her email scandal, commenting for the first time since the FBI cleared her in its renewed probe, second time. Here it is. Take a watch.
Well, I can't say that I was surprised. I never expected them to do that. I was obviously a little bit befuddled by the whole process, but it's behind us now, and I think everybody should focus on what is best for our country and how we're going to meet the challenges we have.
But that, of course, was not the only big controversy to rock the 2016 race. In early October, Donald Trump came under fire after an audio tape was leaked of him talking crudely about women. A few days later, several women accused Trump of unwanted sexual advances, which he, to this day, denies. And as we mentioned, Clinton had her own share of October surprises. We had so many of them. It's like October was 2 months long. Like when WikiLeaks began releasing a massive trove of emails from her campaign manager's account. And then, of course, the FBI's renewed Part 2 investigation into her private server late last month. So we went back and forth and back and forth. In fact, it wasn't even really a surprise anymore. It was like, oh, another whatever.
I think if you look at the polls, the biggest things that shifted everything were that Access Hollywood tape that changed the dynamic of the race. There was a focus on women, and there was a focus, I mean, it changed the whole race, really, and the polls shifted dramatically. And then late in the game, I think that Comey coming out with that letter to Congress stopped what was going to be, I think, her momentum into the final election days, and it really turned the race around. But I also do think, Harris, that the announcement by the administration about Obamacare, the premiums and the deductibles that people had to deal with, while not a specific controversy, it was a reality that everybody's dealing with, really affected this race late.
You know what gave me a tip off of that, Julie? I was looking at Essence magazine, and they actually had an article explaining to women, particularly women of color, why Obamacare was so negatively in the headlines. And I thought, wow, that hit a bullseye somewhere.
It must have. You know, I actually am going to, I'm curious to see whether this theory is going to be proven right. And I'm looking at Florida and specifically Nevada to see if I'm going to be right tomorrow morning or not. I think the biggest controversy of this 2016 campaign was when Donald Trump came down that escalator and started talking disparagingly about building walls and Latinos. And the reason I say that is because the white vote, I think, at the end is going to be a wash. Whatever she makes up with college-educated white women, he's going to offset with a higher turnout among non-college-educated white men. So I think the white vote's ultimately going to probably be roughly the same as Romney Obama was in 2012. What I think is interesting is the turnout in places like Florida and places like Clark County, Nevada, that are going to potentially, among Latinos, that are going to potentially steer those two states towards her column, and whether that is going to signify that his campaign essentially ended the day began when he came down that escalator.
But you have to concede that illegal immigration has become a pretty big issue from the beginning.
No question. But I'm just saying, I wonder if his rhetorical stance against or about Latinos, however you want to address legal immigration, whether that is something that's going to ultimately tip places like Nevada and Florida in her favor, and whether Latinos will make the difference in those two states. Because my understanding is even the non-party affiliated voters that you have coming out in places like Florida with early voting, tended to be more Latino than they anticipated, and what that means for this election start tomorrow morning.
So part of the question has been, and some of it economically based, Sandra, is that, watch for a surge among Latino voters. Were they hit with a bullseye when it came to not just the issue of illegal immigration and immigration as a whole, but also just the economy?
Well, for up to Melissa, she would say the economy would decide everybody's vote. But I remember before Halloween, you said you were going to dress up as the undecided voter because you didn't believe that any really existed. But still, especially in these states where they don't have much of an opportunity for early voting, they're going into the polls today. I feel like I would be lying to myself if I didn't think that even those that were convinced of who they're going to vote for went into that voting booth and said, and there were certain scandals that weighed on their minds more than others when they decided to pull the trigger for one of the candidates versus the other. So you just have, I guess the conversation is, which of those scandals is weighing more on the mind of the American voter as they head into that?
As somebody who already voted today, I mean, it is very real when you get in there and you look at these names. I mean, it's a more momentous moment than you think, even though you know what you're going to do. I think in many cases before you go in there. For me, the biggest scandal is the foundation and the WikiLeaks revealing to us what I always felt like I knew, and seeing it in print. I mean, from Sheikh Mo to the King of Morocco, from the 2014 Nonprofit Lawyer of the Year telling Chelsea Clinton that she felt like donors within the foundation expected a quid pro quo, that they were getting something in exchange for their money. I mean, to see the raw and dirty details, even though they were brought to us in a way that I concede without question was not right, we still saw in writing something that the Clinton campaign never denied. We saw these dirty details inside the foundation where they really were selling the State Department like I always suspected, and that was heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, I come back, though, to the economy and what you said, Brett, and that was Obamacare. I think that when voters get up in the morning, that's still the thing that they're going to look back on and say, this is the thing that affects my life. And it does come down to money in that sense, and whether you have it in your pocket or not.
Exactly.
Well, and look at the stock market in the last couple of days. There is certainly predictions weighing on the price of the stock market, and we have seen it, change directions sharply based on what's happening in the news with the election.
All right, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are not the only ones on the ballot today. The important House and Senate races that could shake up Washington, and how the top of the ticket could help or hurt the down ballot candidates. And after the show, oh my goodness, more Brett Baier. Yes! On Outnumbered Overtime, we put to bed the TV version of us, and then we pop up alive online, foxnews.com/outnumbered. Tap the Overtime tab, and then you can watch us on Facebook Live, too. Our handle is Outnumbered FNC. So much us for you to enjoy, and we want you to be part of the conversation. Join our live chat or comment on Facebook Live, and we'll get you in. Stay close.
As voters make their final decisions now, it won't just be Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton on the ballot, of course. Also at stake, down ballot races that will decide the control of Congress. While most analysts say Democrats may cut into the Republicans' majority in the House, they believe it's unlikely to flip. The Senate, however, could be a different story. Democrats only need to pick up 4 seats to wrestle control of the chamber from Republicans if Hillary wins. And with the GOP having to defend 24 of the 34 seats up for grabs this year, Democrats have more opportunities to flip some of them. Meantime, some say the enthusiasm gap Hillary has with Trump could mean fewer Democratic voters at the polls. Brett Baier, this is something you've been talking a lot about. What do you see happening here? Well,
I think that there are a lot of predictions, but all of them are really tight. And, Charlie Cook and others, Real Clear Politics, have come out with like 51-49 either way, or 50-50 in the Senate. And I think that the last few days, there has been a Republican closing in some of these states, and I think that you could see some surprises tonight. I think because of the vote that you talked about out in Nevada, that Joe Heck, you don't know how he's going to hold up. I think that the race in Florida is a lot closer than they thought it was going to be with Marco Rubio, but you are on the cusp of control of the U.S. Senate. They, remember, have to pick up a net gain of 5. But 4 if Democrats win the White House. And as you look at the map, it is right on that line.
You seem to be nodding and agreeing with most of what Brett's saying.
100%. I mean, what's interesting here is you had senators, a lot of them incumbent senators, people like Rob Portman, who run completely non-coordinated campaign operations from the top of the ticket, which is traditionally something you rarely ever see. And so what Brett, you raised a very good point, which is the Democrats have a superior ground game. They have a much superior modeling game, which I've talked about repeatedly on the couch. But on the other hand, you've got incumbent Republicans who have created their own organization, essentially separate and apart from what the RNC may be doing, or maybe in conjunction with the RNC, but separately from what Trump 2016 is doing. And so, to me, you have people like Rob Portman in Ohio who are going to win, even if Trump doesn't necessarily win Ohio, although I think he's in a position to do it for that reason. Marco Rubio, great example. Trump may lose Florida, but Marco Rubio has had his own organization going on down there since he announced he was running again. So you're absolutely right. Nobody knows what's going to happen as a result of that.
I know for people who are not able to sleep tonight through all the excitement, I am on Fox Business from 1 to 5 a.m. So I am watching these Senate races very closely because remember, this matters a lot. I mean, it is critical because it either allows whoever wins to do everything they've said and everything they want to do or almost nothing. I mean, it's very important. Some of the races we've highlighted to watch, you've talked about. I mean, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Nevada, North Carolina, these are all really interesting races. New Hampshire, Missouri, they're all over the place. They've gone back and forth. They're essential, and we're going to be keeping a close eye on them.
Well, and then the U.S. Supreme Court picks. I mean,
That's
who's going to be in charge in the Senate really matters. You look like you have a thought bubble over
Neither party will have 60 votes. So this will have to be a governing thing where they reach across the aisle. The other thing is in 2 years, Democrats defend 25 seats, 5 of them in states that are reddish. So you are going to have a scenario where at least 5 senators are going to be careful about how they're reacting to, they couldn't go to a Bernie Sanders type legislative agenda if they want to get reelected in those states. So, in other words, in 2 years, this whole thing could flip around again.
Wow.
You want me to scare you? You want me to scare you on our way out?
Oh, no.
Nuclear option. Because that may happen with the Supreme Court. If she gets elected and people like John McCain say we're not going to appoint a Supreme Court justice under her, you may finally see the nuclear option being exercised in ways, and that's
she wouldn't get anything else done.
That would set off World War III.
That's why they call it the nuclear
I can't believe
option.
this is it. This is
Hey,
so good to have you here, Brett Barrett. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both talking about unity in their final pitches to voters. But some say no matter who wins, the nation will remain divided. Whether that's going to be the case.
Between division or unity. We don't have to accept a dark and divisive vision for America. Tomorrow you can vote for a hopeful, inclusive, big-hearted America.
We are fighting to bring us all together as Americans. We're living in a divided nation. We're living in a very divided nation. We're going to be brought together. Just imagine what our country could accomplish if we started working together as one people under one God, saluting one American flag.
Well, 2 very different takes on unity from the candidates. Hillary Clinton claiming that she wants to heal a divided nation. Donald Trump suggesting that the divisiveness will only end if he wins. This, as some say, the nastiness of the campaign may not be gone after today. The Hill's Bob Cusack and Ian Swanson writing, quote, no matter who wins on Tuesday, half the country will be angry. If Donald Trump wins, Democrats will blame FBI Director Jim Comey. If Hillary Clinton wins, Trump and his supporters will likely blame the GOP establishment for not uniting behind him. You guys are all nodding. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, so first of all, I don't think Democrats will blame Jim Comey. I think Democrats will blame themselves for not running a good campaign, or at least I would. Although I think she has run a good campaign, which is why I think ultimately she'll prevail. What is interesting to me is Democrats will probably go through the same thing to some extent that Republicans went through the last few years, which is, should we have nominated Bernie Sanders? Where's the direction of our party going? However, if Donald Trump loses, and they're right, you have Paul Ryan, whose head is going to be on a platter by some of these Trump supporters, not literally, so everybody has to calm down. But what happens to the Republican Party? I mean, ultimately, that's the tragedy of what's going to end up happening here, where you're not going to just have fights between Democrats and Republicans if she gets elected. You're going to have an explosive fight, especially in the House.
Why is that a tragedy? Why is that a tragedy?
Why is that only a Republican thing? Because I think you're wrong about that. I think that's going to be...
If she gets elected?
If it happens with either person getting elected, I think both these parties are going to have to take a look at themselves. I mean, we were on the floor with those Bernie Sanders supporters in Philly. They were crying.
I mean, listen, when we just talked about the Senate, you're going to have... you'll have... potentially, if they win the Senate and they win the White House, Chuck Schumer, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. And they will have a narrow majority with a Democratic president who's trying to get something done.
Right.
Now, you mean to tell me that there's not going to be a fight in the Democratic Party
It's not
for the future and the ideology that leads forward the Democratic Party?
It will be this kind of fight. It'll be a fight where Chuck Schumer is still going to be the Senate Majority Leader. It's not going to be a fight to replace Chuck Schumer with Elizabeth Warren, or it's not going to be to replace it's not going to be an ideological fight, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in the way that a Republican fight would happen, where I think...
Oh, I think you're wrong. Why do you think Debbie Wasserman Schultz fought so hard to make sure that Bernie didn't go forward? They didn't want to go that far.
I don't think there's enough Bernie Sanders people in the Democratic caucus to have that happen.
I don't know. I mean, Bernie Sanders has been grossly underestimated before.
Not in the caucus.
Despite the fact that we found out that he had a pact to not attack Hillary Clinton on different things. I mean, I think there are a lot of hurt feelings on both sides. We saw in the emails that he didn't really have a fair shake, and that's why Debbie Wasserman Schultz is out. And I think we've learned a lot of these things in this campaign. On the Republican side, Brett, I'd be interested in your perspective. I mean, you look at it, Democrats lost in 80, 84, and 88, and then took a step back and said, what is it that we're doing wrong? 3 times in a row. And from that, Bill Clinton emerged. Maybe something similar happens on the Republican side.
I think it will be fascinating, to your point about the Republican Party. I do think that there is also a Democratic side to it. But, I asked Donald Trump in the last interview, what happens, if he doesn't win? And he's obviously confident that he can pull off a win today. But if he doesn't, does he go back to business, or does he lead a movement? And he said, well, maybe I'll tell you on November 9th, but I really feel like all of these people have followed me, and they really we could do something in the future. So is Donald Trump then the de facto leader of this party, or a populist party?
Can you give us an idea of what you expect to happen if Hillary Clinton should win the election tonight? What happens with her investigations and Congress pushing forward to get more questions answered there? Will we see, Newt Gingrich said, tragically, we've drifted into an environment where if Hillary's elected, the criminal investigations will be endless.
Well, listen, the Justice Department is saying that the email investigation, for their sense, is over. From what we're told, the foundation investigation continues, and you listen to Jason Chaffetz and Trey Gowdy and others saying that they are going to continue forward with questions about these things. I do think that one thing we need to be careful of is that Donald Trump could shoot the gap today. We don't know until we see the exit polls what the electorate looks like.
Absolutely.
And I think it's very possible that some of these states that you think are going Democrat could shift 1 or 2 points.
Absolutely.
So as we talk about it.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure. Tomorrow and the days going forward, we have a lot of issues facing this country.
That's true. We have a lot. We have a lot to work on. And that note, so what would be tonight's big surprise? What do we need to watch for? And most importantly, how late do we have to stay up? Well, I'm staying up till 5 a.m. But for you,
we're with you,
until
Melissa.
the final result comes in. That's right. Brett Baer with his predictions. Up next. Ooh, I like that.
You wear a special hat.
He just found out.
Deep breath. It's here. It's really here. And all day and into the wee hours of the morning, right here on FNC. This is the only place to be. All-day coverage. And at 6 p.m. Eastern, Brett and Megyn take over. I'm sure that they will have plenty of coffee on hand, so be sure to stay with us as the votes come in and are tallied throughout the evening. And, of course, your predictions. You don't have to tell us who you think is going to win the election.
That's
but
good. What
time do you think that the race will get called tonight?
I'm not even going to give you that. What I'm going to tell you is that at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, we are going to get a download from the exit polls. And we have, as all the networks have in this consortium, they are enclosed, and they don't come out until 5:15. Then we get the exit polls of these key states. Then the raw vote total, and as we mentioned, a lot of these states, 39 of them, have raw vote that will happen right when the polls close. So we get that data and the exit poll data, and our decision desk will be able to then calculate how these states may go. We're not going to make a call before we know it's a call.
I can tell you this fun fact. In 2012, Fox News called Obama in the race at 11:18 p.m.
Right, and if it's a big spread, that time is probably about right. If it is tight, you could be talking later into the evening, especially if we see some states that are really tight that go the other way, as I mentioned before. we might see a push of that timetable.
There's a buzz in this building. There are so many people.
I know, it's very
everywhere.
When you walk in here early this morning, you could just tell that our numbers are like triple. Real quickly, because I know we're going to talk about this more in overtime, Outnumbered Overtime Online momentarily, but I'm getting tweets from people who wonder if they haven't voted yet and they're seeing the exit polling from the other coast, if it makes other people stay home. They worry about that. This is how we do it. Why?
Well, we have done it this way for a long time, and we extrapolate where the vote's coming from and where it is. Obviously, if you waited until California and Hawaii voted, we'd have a long night before we made a call. But I think, some of those states are predictable Democratic states, California, for example. Okay. But there are down-ballot races that could be affected by an early call in the evening, and whether they're fired up to split and say we need to provide a different representative than the presidency, or whether they're kind of bummed out and don't go to the polls and those down ballot races are affected. So they're really good questions about when the calls are made.
All right, and that call will be made in our new fancy Fox News studio. Thank you, Brett Baer, for giving us your time today. You are a busy man. Great to have you. We'll all be watching tonight, and we're going to keep it right here. A little bit more of Brett and Outnumbered Overtime on the web. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. We're back on TV tomorrow at noon Eastern with a new president. Happening Now starts right now.